I have always had a problem with astrology. Why is it that every astrology website looks like it was made in 1999? Why is it that most people who practice astrology seem completely out of touch with reality?
No, we still live on a flat earth and we still live in this world. And these are the people who have given you the satanic lie of the globe.
And why do so many astrologers behave like scammers?
Like, it's not a scam, but we're trying to make something legitimate. But if an influencer talks about a project and it's not their fault that it goes to zero.
I have rarely encountered practitioners of astrology who have a university education in topics related to math, science, or engineering. I am the last person you would expect to get involved with astrology. For this discussion, I should list my credentials. I have a master's in science and information security policy and management from Carnegie Mellon University, and a master's in business administration from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I studied computer science as an undergraduate and have about 10 years of experience as a software engineer. Lastly, I read 300 nonfiction books over the course of 6 years. All of this was significantly disrupted when I met my astrology teacher. In my first experience, he read my chart and told me things about my life that were so specific that I knew there was no way he could do so by cold reading alone. I still didn't believe him, so I went back with charts of people I had known for years and tested him again. Given no context on these individuals, he told me qualities about these people in seconds that took me years to figure out myself. Finally, he predicted when I would get a job offer within a week of precision. His accuracy irritated me. I wanted to know, how did he do it? What else could I do but take his class to find out? Sometimes in life, we come to a life-defining fork even though we may not realize it at the time. What I was interested in at the time was resolving my vexation on the effectiveness of astrology against the absence of scientific evidence. In my first YouTube video, Science Does Not Know What Reality Is, I went down a rabbit hole down to the very core of the universe to find a space in which divination tools could make reasonable sense. Fast forward half a decade, and I have read hundreds of charts for clients across the world. Like my teacher, I also read people blind with no context other than their birth date. I went on my friend's channel Break the Rules stream several times and read subscribers live having nothing other than their birth chart. What is thinking between? Spirituality at its core should express concepts that are in alignment with and reconcile with reality and practical guidance. For example, I have suffered spiritual-minded people who advise the absurdity that I should just manifest money. As someone with an MBA from a school that holds its academic standards in high regard, I feel morally obliged to say that this is total nonsense. Yet there is at least a nugget of truth in this nebulous directive. My first job ever was at Boston Market, where I made a whopping $5.15 an hour at minimum wage. Back then, I foresaw that I was never going to achieve a high income if I just stayed on that path. I had to quote-unquote manifest money by taking the long path, getting an education, and then making 20 times the money for the same, if not less, effort. Spiritual gurus such as Sadhguru have 12 million followers on YouTube for a reason. The timeless wisdom of spirituality can provide practical application for our daily lives. However, these high-level directives need to meet the ground with pragmatic guidance and proven methods. This is the primary aim of Thinking Between, to bridge the gap between spiritual truth and practical living. This is the perspective from which we should approach astrology. How to use astrology. Step 1. Utilize a healthy dose of skepticism. Perhaps the most important personality quality of my astrology teacher is his level of skepticism. I've lost count of the number of times he has told me either that something just won't happen or that it won't happen in as big a way as I predicted it. If we look at the default pattern of astrologers, it's common for them to say something like, "This upcoming eclipse will completely upend the world order." Sensationalism is just not helping the practice. Eclipses often coincide with major events, but we need to be measured in how we evaluate their impact. There was a solar eclipse on October 14th, 2023, just 7 days after the Hamas attack on Israel. At first, this might seem like a slam dunk, but there are on average 2 eclipses every year. Not every eclipse will bring such an ostensible event as this one. Step 2. Do not prey on people's anxiety. There is something fundamental about human beings that they just cannot sit comfortably with uncertainty regardless of their level of intelligence or education. I have experienced people from all walks of life who projected their anxiety on me on all types of issues, from the mundane to the very serious. There is an important difference between telling a client this event will happen versus saying the chart is suggesting this type of events might occur. Nobody knows the future, astrologers included. Step 3. Observe, don't predict. The core structure of the scientific method is to make a hypothesis and then observe the results. Too often, astrologers act overconfident regarding their predictions. As in science, every astrologer should assume they know nothing until they can observe the event directly. For instance, typically in a session with a client, I will give them important dates to pay attention to. My request to every client is always the same. They should let me know what happened on the dates that I suggested. The more that clients give me feedback, the more I can connect real-world data to planetary patterns. One of the essential ingredients of astrology is interpretation. It is impossible to read a chart without applying some degree of translation. A Saturn-Pluto conjunction could mean the beginning of a world war, such as when it happened in Cancer in 1914, or it could mean the outbreak of COVID-19 as it did when the configuration happened in Capricorn. Only after observation do we know what the correct interpretation was. Step 4. Astrology is qualitative, not quantitative. While science deals with the world of the measurably objective, astrology deals with the subjective depending on the meaning of a situation. Let's say I was reading for a client who's struggling to find work and there's something in their chart associated with money or job opportunities. The amount of money this person will receive is relative to how much money they already have. $1,000 can mean a lot to one person, but very little to another. Step 5. Astrology is a map of meaning. If an event is not meaningful to that individual, then it's likely not to show up in that person's chart. Jeff Bezos can lose $1 million in a day, and it's unlikely that detail would be shown in his astrology. Meanwhile, someone who bootstrapped their first business and received their first ever $1 million check would show the chart with enormous significance. Generally, if something is routine, astrology won't be very useful in predicting it. Meaning is subjective, so it is not possible to read the events in someone's life without having some idea of what matters to them first. One person may think their daughter's first day of school is profoundly meaningful, while another may only care what happens to their business. Step 6. Prioritize reality over astrology. When astrology says one thing and reality says the other, we should always listen to reality first. Let's say someone is struggling with unemployment, but their chart suggests that a significant job opportunity exists a few months out. This person should not sit on their hands and wait for the appropriate time to get off the couch. This doesn't mean that reality always beats astrology. Quite the contrary. It just means that reality can be taken at face value, while astrology needs to prove itself. In 2019, I took a look at the charts and said that we would probably see some major event occur in January 2020 during the big lineup of Capricorn planets, as most astrologers also predicted. At the time, there was nothing to suggest that something as disruptive as COVID would appear. While I had a general feeling that something would happen, there was no way to prove the hunch had any merit until the event occurred. Secondly, there was no practical way I could have known it had anything to do with a virus. It is my hope that if astrologers can follow these steps, the legitimacy of astrology will be improved for the benefit of everyone. Astrology needs better rational analysis. When I was deep into my research phase of astrology, I picked up the book The Case for Astrology by John Anthony West. The book was out of print and I had to dig for a used copy. I dove into the book optimistic that I had finally found the holy grail for the meaning of the universe. I honestly have to say, this is perhaps the worst book I've ever read in defense of astrology. I remember feeling depressed. If this is the best defense that the field has, then astrology is doomed. Yet hope is not lost. As mentioned previously, I later did a deep dive into quantum physics and theoretical physics. The further I looked into contemporary physics, the weirder it seemed to get. This is best described in the famous quote by Terence McKenna: "The universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine." Let me quickly debunk the idea of planets affecting our lives and then position a better theory. Let's say in the future there was a space war in which Mars is blown up. Does this mean that Mars can no longer be read in a birth chart? Or even more likely, what would happen if someone was born on Mars? How would we read the planet Earth in a horoscope? Or best of all, what if someone was born in an entirely different solar system? What then? Astrology need not fear science, but rather work with it. As mentioned in Science Does Not Know What Reality Is, there is infinite room for discovery as it relates to answering the question, what is consciousness? At the moment, we just don't know. If astrology works, and that's a big if, it likely has to do with a connection between consciousness and the universe. Carl Jung described synchronicity as what he called the acausal connecting principle. Synchronistic phenomena prove the simultaneous occurrence of meaningful equivalences in causally unrelated processes. In other words, they prove that a content perceived by an observer can at the same time be represented by an outside event without any causal connection. From this, it follows either that the psyche cannot be localized in space, or that space is relative to the psyche. The idea of relativity in physics already exists. Velocity is not defined as absolute speed, but rather as speed relative to an observer. The famous Einstein equation is called the theory of special relativity, in which movement through space is connected to movement through time. Finally, in quantum physics, the presence of an observer has physical effects as it does in the double-slit experiment. How reasonable people use astrology. In short, reasonable astrologers work in agreement with reality and maintain a healthy dose of skepticism. Astrology is not a religion, it is a phenomenon that is interesting to observe. Reasonable people combine their pre-existing knowledge and skills in combination with astrology. Everything we already know about reality remains, while astrology serves as an intuitive guide. The best astrologers are not the ones who have memorized every planet and asteroid, but those who have seen thousands of charts and matched them to the endless possibilities of real life. In the case of my teacher, who has read clients for 48 years, when he sees a new chart, he has thousands upon thousands of stories to match against. Opening our minds to spirituality should not mean we lose them altogether. We can have both. So how do reasonable people use astrology? They keep their eyes on the stars and their feet on the ground.